So thank you so much. And we're going to try to keep you sort of like awake and engaged as we go through, because we have a few grounds to cover in 20 minutes. We're going to talk about the future of exchange trading. But before going to that and explain what off-exchange trading is, because raise of hands, how many of you knows what off-exchange trading is? Okay, not too many people. But we need to know what counterparty risk is and what problem we're trying to solve. So stay with me. We're going to a short journey, and from there, everything will start to make sense. In 2008, I was in New York when Lehman failed. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember those days. And we clearly understand that one model with central counterparty was failing as well. So it wasn't just a temporary drop in the market. It wasn't just a correction. It was a failing of trust on the financial market, on the current system. And we realized that counterparty risk was not yet solved as a problem. And we argue even if it can be completely solved, right? So we are trying through iteration to optimize and minimize as much as possible counterparty risk. But what is counterparty risk? So we have two definitions, BIS and OCC, the Office of Currency Control. Is the risk that the counterparty through a transaction could default before the final settlement of the transaction cash flow. What does that mean? In simple terms, you make a bet with your friend, and when it's time to pay, the friend is either not able to pay or does not want to pay. And now you have a risk because maybe you have another bet with another friend that you cannot pay. So we are going to use this analogy as we go through, but the problem becomes more complex when we're transferring this to digital asset and digital asset markets. Because now we don't not only have the intention of paying, but we have an additional problem on the ability to pay. Because now the party that needs to pay might not be able to pay because he has a security breach. And we know it's not far-fetched because we have 1.5 billion just lost by an exchange a few days ago. We have plenty of graveyards to go through in the last 3 to 4 years in digital assets. So what are the problems with counterparty risk in digital asset markets? Centralized exchange that can have security vulnerabilities or mismanagement. We have centralized custodians, which then pretty much shift the problem from an exchange to a custodian. And then you have sort of like the discussion on who to trust between the two. Then you have lender and borrowers and OTC, where there's an issue of defaulting. So maybe they find themselves in a liquidity crunch in a very difficult market, and they're not able to pay when it's time to pay. And then I left for last probably one of the most critical, that there is no central counterparty. So first we discussed in the first slide that we might have an issue with central counterparty, and how central counterparty model can fail. In digital asset market, we do not have a central counterparty. We have institutions or enterprises that run as a central counterparty, but there is no regulated central counterparty in digital asset market. So if you stay with me, I kind of show you also not only how we can improve the security with our product, but also how we can unlock liquidity that is currently locked in the market. So there is an opportunity for new trading volume that is currently not pursued because of the current market structure. So the market impact of counterparty risk is, we estimate to be 20 to 30% of available liquidity currently not reached by buy side. And the reason is that buy side investors are capped on the risk exposure they can take with this counterparty. Why? Because if I'm a risk officer of a buy side and I need to trade with exchange 1, 2, and 3, not giving names, I will cap my trader, saying you can trade up to this because I do not want the exposure to that counterparty, because I don't know if it will be solvent. I don't know if it will have the assets, most importantly. And second, the buy side investor wants to diversify risk across custody solution, because if one custodian fail, he lost one part of the total available assets of his client's assets, not everything. Then we have the two problems that kind of spring from that. So now if I need to move assets to those counterparty, I not only have the risk, now I have also the problem of liquidity available in the venue where I want to trade. And as we know, blockchain transaction takes time to broadcast. On Bitcoin 10 minutes, on other protocol less, but nevertheless not within the speed of trading. So now we have the problem of having to rebalance asset from one liquidity provider to another, which makes the market, and buy side specifically, lose time. And as we know, time translates to market impact on trading, which means that you lose an opportunity. And last one, the problem that we have seen when we started this journey is lack of visibility on funds governance. So if I move my funds to an exchange, do I know who has control over these assets? Do we know the conditions by which that specific entity can move the assets of my client? So this concept of off-exchange trading technology start to emerge. Roughly around 2021, people start talking about it. That's when we start to look at this problem with Ledger Enterprise. And the problem that we're trying to solve are very clear. How can we pledge assets to a liquidity provider without those assets being transferred to the liquidity provider? So if I want to trade on an exchange, how can I trade on that exchange without having to move my crypto assets to that exchange? How can I verify the availability of assets at any point? So if I am an exchange, I say, okay, you can trade. Your assets are not at the exchange, but at least I need visibility to those assets. And as an asset manager or buy side, I want to be able to lock and unlock the assets to any liquidity provider available in the market as I see fit, as I trade through the day. So how can I achieve that? And then I want to make sure that I can provide settlement approval and execution functionality when it's time to settle the assets. And lastly, I want to provide functionality to configure governance in case of disputes. Because yes, as a buy side, I can default myself because operationally I didn't do as well. And now as an exchange, and I need those assets. Or vice versa, if the exchange goes down, how do I have the authority to withdraw the assets? So all of those problems falls into the technology of exchange trading and of exchange trading trying to solve that problem. Now, I call all the other solution before our solution legacy digital asset of exchange. And the reason is that we went through every possible risk that kind of feed into counterparty risk in digital asset market and say, okay, how can we do better than this? Okay. So we see exchange risk. So some solution skew toward more control toward the exchange. The exchange can withdraw the assets when they think is necessary to do so. Not something that we want to do. We basically haven't solved the problem if that's the solution. Smart contract risk, interesting solution. We look at that, but I have several friends running companies that do smart contract audit. And we know that smart contract, unfortunately, still fail too often. So not a good solution. Then custodian risk. And we sort of like look at this and decide to go toward that direction. But we decided to provide even an improvement to that. Custodian risk is good. The custodian is supposed to operate the assets and make sure they are custodied correctly. But you're still exposed to the single custodian operation. Meaning if the custodian mismanaged the funds or the custodian has an issue or a breach, you have the same problem. And we do not want what we call network lock-in. We do not want, as an asset manager, a single solution where if you pledge the asset with a single custodian, they're locked there. And scaling then the operation is unfeasible. So if you want to use more than one more than one custodians, you cannot do that. So we wanted to solve for all these problems, and we launched our product called Enterprise Trade Link. Ledger Enterprise Trade Link is a new off-exchange market standard. So we're very different from any other solution in the market because we are not ourselves the custodian of the assets. As Ledger, we never are. We always provide the technology to custody the assets, and we do that providing you self-custody. So as a custodian, you will be the one running the solution, but we give a market standard. We give an off-exchange market standard that any custodian in the market can use, so that as a buy side, I have more than one choice. Because let's be honest, if off-exchange needs to scale in the market, you cannot have only one custodian provide that solution. It will not scale. So we are custodian agnostic, meaning we don't care who you are as a custodian. If you want to build your network, you can use TradeLink and compete in the market for liquidity. We offer one single API standard for custodian exchange communication, so that as an exchange, you do not need to connect to custodian A API and then custodian B API, so on and so forth, all the way to N custodians. You have one single API, you connect to that, and now you have access to all the custodians that run TradeLink. And then we offer, through our governance framework and the security of Ledger, the full visibility and transparency of collateral balances, which also give you cryptographic proof and control over the pledging, settlement, and arbitration of collateral assets. So I'm going to give you a quick run through the solution. We don't have much time. We have 10 minutes left. I also want to leave some time for questions. But I give you like a quick overview so that you appreciate how we decide to design this solution. So we have three different, let's say, player in the market. We call it asset manager, who use the asset under custody with a custodian to pledge those assets as collateral for trading. We have a custodian who is the one custodying the assets, ensuring the security and the integrity of the assets, and make sure that this persists throughout the trading period all the way to the settlement time. So the custodian, continue to do the job they're supposed to do, making sure that the assets are preserved and sound when needed. And the liquidity provider, who act as basically providing liquidity for the buy side, the asset manager, to trade and facilitate the trading execution and settlement. So how does it work? So as an asset manager, I do an on-chain transaction. I deposit assets to a special account that we call TradeLink account or collateral account. You can always withdraw the funds from this account. However, if you want to withdraw the funds, you need to request approval from the custodian. Now, the funds are now in the collateral account with an on-chain transaction. So let's say you have the equivalent of 10 million in crypto assets in that account. Now you want to pledge an amount of that, let's say 1 million, to a specific liquidity provider. Let's call it liquidity provider A or exchange A. So now you create a pledge request. A pledge request, differently from any other solution in the market, is a cryptographic proof of your intent, which means that you will need to approve that using our Ledger device and or our API in case you want to do that programmatically. Once you create the transaction, the pledge request goes to the exchange for approval. The exchange can approve or reject depending on your current position. Let's say you're fully exposed, that he has already call you for margin, so you're not credit worthy. In that case, you will reject it, or he can approve it. If it approves, what the exchange will do, it says, okay, you pledge 1 million of the total collateral. I can see it because I have access via API. I had approved the request, so I know that you pledged those assets and now they're fully locked, cryptographically locked. And now I feel comfortable to give you equivalent 1 million to trade at my exchange. So you see, we solve the initial problem we were trying to solve, where the assets stay in custody with my preferred custodian, secured by Ledger hardware, and I'm able to trade. Now, you trade through the period, and then at the end of the period, you need to settle the assets. So that's the key moment. So how do we do that process? Well, not us, we provide the technology. How do they do that process? The exchange raises a request for settlement of assets. The settlement of assets go to the custodian and to the asset manager. At the beginning, you decide if the asset manager needs to be in the flow of settlement. If you agree that is not the case, the asset manager is out. If you believe it should be in the flow, the asset manager can give an initial approval of settlement. So let's say we do have pre-approval. The asset manager gives the pre-approval. Once the asset manager gives the pre-approval, the exchange can go out and settle their side of the trade. So let's say that the asset manager bought crypto asset A, sold B. So is buying crypto asset A, he needs to receive that from the exchange. So the exchange goes out, broadcast. Now the custodian gives the final approval. And crypto assets B, that the buy side has sold, is now broadcasted. Now settlement is complete. So you see, everything is controlled by governance. That governance is controlled by the security of our hardware, a ledger, but everything is managed operationally by the parties involved. So we have solved all the initial problem that we were discussing initially. So now the custodian can enforce control, can reject any request, and also, more importantly, can operate within the platform to resolve disputes. So if there is a dispute during the process, the custodian or an independent third party can come in and say, okay, I reviewed this, I make a determination, and based on that determination, I want to execute that specific transaction. Again, the governance of Ledger Enterprise will provide that. So I leave you with this. The methodology and the design that we have proposed is flexible. So what we have proposed thus far can extend to other models. So in our model, we have an exchange. We can offer other model with a prime broker or where brokerage is in the middle. All of that is available today.